Okay, happy Tuesday, everyone.
Yowza, 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 as Fuzzy Bear would say.
Who?
Sorry, it's from my childhood. It's the Muppets. You guys remember the Muppets, don't you?
Oh, yeah, a
The
little bit,
Muppet
not
Show,
really.
Fozzie Bear.
Well,
Yowza,
to be honest,
yowza,
I was
yowza.
never a fan of the Muppets, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it is
Not a
about
Muppet
it.
person.
Puppets, they're kind of creepy.
You didn't get into the whole kind of Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog thing?
No, I think their voices were really annoying, especially Miss Piggy's.
I liked Animal, the drummer.
What did he do?
He drummed and kind of grunted.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. Well, welcome along to another Tuesday Night Live, guys. It's great to have you along here. We actually have some viewers, some of our friends who are from Orange, but they're actually not in Orange tonight. So we wanted to give a big shout out to our Orange crew watching.
Welcome.
Welcome. It's good to have you guys back. We've missed having you along to Tuesday Night Live. But maybe perhaps you can let us know where you're watching from tonight. Perhaps if you're not in Bathurst, let us know. Don't write down your address if you don't want to be too creepy, but just give us your postcode or something.
Log on, tag your mates.
Yeah, tag your mates, bring them along, invite them. Remember, question time coming up later tonight, so keep on commenting all your questions. Baseno,
Yes.
I have another random question for you, because I just feel like random questions are always the great things
This is
to
what
start
Tuesday
with.
nights have turned into. Random questions.
Random Kate questions,
Yep.
random nights. You just
You
never
call
know
yourself
what's
Kate?
it was a slip of the tongue. So.
Because I thought you punched people who called you Kate.
No.
Kate's
I
okay.
warmed to it. Kate's okay.
Katie's not good though.
No.
Katie's bad.
Don't do that.
Don't do
Or Katie Wadey mashed potato. As
You said it. You said it.
we're just gonna put it out there to everyone. Don't see Seno.
Yeah.
Your name is literally Seno. Like we call you your nickname.
Yeah.
But is there a nickname that you don't like?
My aunties when I was a kid, because my real name, my proper name is Andrew.
Oh.
My aunties called me Droopy.
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 Why Droopy?
Andrew, Drew,
Oh.
Droopy.
I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, but I get it.
I wasn't a fan of that one.
Oh.
But I'm not a fan of most variations. You know?
Oh, okay.
Not a fan of Andy, not a fan of
Andy.
Drew.
Andy Pandy?
Andy Pandy pudding in pie. Yes, yes, yes.
There we go. Maybe I'll
Nature's
start
all-
using these ones
Yeah,
now.
we can be Katie and Andy. It's the Katie and Andy
It's
show.
got a bit more of a ring to it, don't you
Yeah,
think, than just
it does.
Kate and Seno? Anyway, we're off topic. That was not the random question I had for you, Seno.
Okay.
The random question
Different.
I had for you
Yep.
was, have you read anything cool or interesting or, just a bit out there in the Bible recently?
Oh, in the Bible, I'm not sure if I read anything out there, but I did was reading Titus 3 with someone yesterday and looking at this idea that God saved us because of His mercy, not because of what we've done. And I just think that is profound. I mean, that is actually radical, and a radical idea that our status with God is not based on what we do,
Yeah.
but on Him and His mercy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, actually, I've been reading Hosea recently, and that's very much based on that
Oh,
idea.
yeah,
That
yeah.
whole thing is about how much God
Yeah.
loves when Israel really
Yeah,
didn't
I
deserve
love
it.
that bit in chapter 11 of Hosea where it's almost like God is he's fulminating, he's getting really angry, he's going, I'm going to smash you, I'm going to beat you down. And then he turns around and he says, but how can I do that?
Yeah, he's like, I just
I
can't.
can't do that to you. And it's just it's that profound moment where you see God's justice and the impact of the evil of the world and our evil, but also His mercy and His love.
Yeah, yeah, very true. Very interesting. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. Glad that you've been reading something pretty cool in the Bible.
Do you have a share thing? Do you want to share?
Oh, I can share, show and tell.
Yeah.
I've actually been reading Daniel recently. I
Wow.
started in the last couple of days.
Psychedelic hits.
Yeah, and Daniel is just one of those books. So it's an Old Testament book for those
Yeah.
who've never read Daniel before or never heard of it. And just some full-on things happening in it. It's, the stories about
Yeah.
the lion's den and people getting chucked into the lion's den.
Oh,
and
yeah,
God
yeah,
saving them and, angels and even the kings and all these crazy dreams. And there's just so much going on that I kind of forgot how full on it is.
Yeah, it fits in the LSD section of the Bible.
Yeah, definitely.
You,
You just
trippy.
think, surely these things didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
But
You ate a few
they do.
mushrooms and... Yeah.
But yeah, it's super interesting, and I just always forget. Every time I go to read Daniel, I'm like, oh, I've read Daniel before. But this time reading it, I was like, whoa, this stuff is like really strange.
I remember goats charging around.
In Daniel.
Goats with lots of horns and heads and things.
Yes.
So that's my Daniel.
The Bible is weird sometimes, isn't
It
it?
certainly is. Yep.
And we've been reading through Ecclesiastes. There's some weird stuff going on there, but
Yeah.
it's a bit more real in a sense.
Yeah. You'd say it's grounded, but it's not grounded in necessarily a nice way. Is it? It's been a pretty hard trip, I think, to get into this book and for it to just test our lives. You know, it's like every aspect of life is just looking at methodically, going through, and every week it's the Eeyore book.
Yeah, and tonight is, you know, if not a bit harder tonight actually, and we'll see that when we get into it. I don't want to give away too much.
No, it's the worst.
But it's just coming and coming again and again.
Yeah.
With these big questions.
It's a short passage tonight, but it's the worst of the lot, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So stick around for that, guys.
Yeah.
Stick around for the worst talk ever.
Yeah.
No, but it will be good. But Sano, you know, we have been now doing Tuesday Night Live. We worked it out. We calculated it for 189 days so far.
Or 6 months, roughly.
Yes,
Give or take.
6
Just
months.
over 6 months.
No, but I want 189 days.
Okay.
Which
you
means
want to highlight that.
I want to highlight that because it means that there's 86 days until Christmas.
Okay, I'm not sure what the connection between the numbers is.
The days.
Yes.
It's better to know how many days.
Okay, so we're closer to Christmas than we are to the start of Tuesday Night
Yes.
Live. Right, okay.
No, but it has been a pretty big journey. 189 days, 6 months. Like, that's a long time that we've been doing this for now. And we're kind of reflecting on the changes that have happened in Tuesday Night Live, our setup, our professionalism, I guess you could say. There's not too many mistakes anymore.
Oh, really?
Which I think some people might be missing, actually. I think, you know, one of our favourite, well, we don't have favourites. One of our viewers, Beth, used to always make a comment that, you know, it's not a Tuesday Night Live unless there's a technical problem. But there's been lots that have happened.
Yep.
We've grown lots, but there's been a lot of random questions come out from our viewers.
Yeah, like nicknames from your childhood.
Yes.
Things like that.
Things like that. We've had the apples. What's your favourite apple? Which caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to bring that up too much anymore. But we've also had what's your favourite dried fruit? Again, a lot of different opinions on dried fruit. Max already asked a question, which is, what is the best way to have steak? Because, you know, you just need to...
I'm not sure what he means by way, but the best cooking of steak is medium rare. That's acknowledged by all the top chefs and everyone. Medium rare. Rare is actually a different flavour. It's a distinctive different flavour between rare and medium rare. Medium rare is the best, I think.
There you go. Well, thanks for your question, Mac. But I've got a better question.
All right.
And I want you guys to answer at home or wherever you're watching from. So get on to the comments and let us know. But what is your favourite ice cream on a stick?
Okay. Do we want to start with what the options could be, what the sort of things are? Like when
I guess when you think of ice creams, what do you think of?
We had options in our family because we were pretty poor.
Yeah.
And so there were the standard options that were like the icy poles, and you know it was like lemonade on a stick.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Boring, isn't
they weren't terribly appealing, but they were what we could afford.
Yeah.
And if we were going a step up, it'd be the paddle pop. Were you paddle pop?
Oh yeah, you've definitely got to be a paddle pop.
So what was your favourite paddle pop?
Always rainbow. Oh, chocolate. Ooh. Probably chocolate. I think I'm a safe person. I always go for chocolate.
Yeah, I go chocolate, but I had a soft spot for vanilla. I love vanilla paddle pops.
Wow, it's boring. I don't think I've ever had a vanilla paddle pop.
They're awesome. They were great. I don't know if they make them anymore, but they were amazing.
I don't know. You'd have to check.
Yeah.
There you go.
We actually lived just up the street from the Streets Factory.
Is that near Campbelltown at all?
No. Ours, I think it was a distribution centre actually. We called it the Streets Factory.
Yeah,
we used to go skateboard in the big parking lot down there. But
and then eat your paddle pops as you did it?
Well, every now and then we'd get a freebie.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It was very cool.
Okay, but is it your favourite?
No. Paddle pops are my favourite.
We've worked our way up. We've worked our way up
time to
from
kind
icicles.
of think and comment and talk. But it's not about what's my favourite. It's about what is objectively the best ice cream on a stick ever made.
Oh wow, this is a big call.
This is objective. This is information out there in the world. Everyone can access, right? If you're wise, you know the truth of this. The best ice cream on a stick
ever
made.
Talking about wisdom here, guys.
Ever made.
Serious.
It's not the Maximon, right? It's not.
the Mexican ones are pretty
It's
good.
not the Magnum or the Magnum Ego or any ridiculous nonsense confection like
They're
that.
too fancy, I think.
The best ice cream on a stick ever made that's passed the test of time is the Golden Gate Time.
It is an Aussie classic.
Well, we polled this room. There's 5 people in this room. At least 3 people said the Golden Gate Time.
That's true, but Stanley actually says, and he's commented just to make sure everyone knows, that Frosty Fruits are actually by far the best.
That's so not the best. they're an option. They're okay.
Are they as good as Icy Poles?
The Golden Gate Time has everything. It has the toffee flavoured ice cream. It has the chocolate.
The crunch,
it has the biscuit.
The
it
crunch
has,
on the outside is good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Golden Gate Times are great. And recently they've started bringing out, the different flavours of Golden Gate Times, which I don't think are good.
No, that's right. That's, never go for the gimmicks.
Yeah.
Just go for the straight.
No. What about non-stick ice creams? Is there kind of...
yes, there is objectively a best ice cream in the world, bar none, Safala Gold.
Oh, okay. Well, that's only Bathurst people can have that.
Yes, that's a shame for everyone else in the world. But Safala Gold is the best ice cream in the world. I think. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know.
What? You're gonna get hokey pokey from some weird Norgan vase place?
See, I'm a choc chip mint kind of person.
Oh, come on! No.
We're
that's
not agreeing.
That's a child's ice cream.
Oh, it's great!
Oh,
come on. Seriously, guys, give me a love heart for mint choc chip. Just send your love hearts through.
And instead, give me a powerful thumbs up for Golden Gate Time and Safala Gold.
Nah, see, I reckon you're wrong, Senu. I reckon a lot more people like choc chip mint.
I don't think so. Mint choc chip's okay. I don't hate it, but
There you go. Okay, Lockie's given us a big hello from the church to everyone. So hi everyone watching from the church tonight.
From the church.
See Ellie Owens. She's already given us a love heart, so I think she's voting for mint choc chip.
I'm pretty sure she's from Orange, so they don't have access to Safala Gold. So anyway.
Well, you guys will have to let us know what your favourite ice cream on a stick is. See, I wonder does this count?
Yeah.
But what about Macca's ice cream cones with a flake in it?
They're
It's technically not a stick.
They're pretty good value.
But they are great.
You can't get better value than that. I tell you what I used to do though. I would get a soft serve, and you could often get a soft serve in a cup. So it's cheaper than a
cone.
The same, but you get it without the cone. But you get that with a hot apple pie instead of apple pie and ice cream.
Yeah, but the money that you're saving on the cone, then you're just spending on an apple pie.
No, but it's pretty nice. Apple pie ice cream.
Awesome. I don't know. I feel like cones are just always the greatest.
That is something I think for me. I feel like we're just taking the last conversation, but how little Macca's I've eaten in the last 6 months compared to the 6 months before that.
Wow.
COVID has
has changed your diet.
It's changed my diet.
Maybe tonight's the night, so maybe you can go get some ice cream and an apple pie.
Maybe I'll go and buy Macca's. Just spend $100 at Macca's and no.
Nah, I feel like you could spend your money on better things.
Okay,
but...
probably, like a Golden Gate Time.
No, there you go. Well, that's probably enough chat about ice cream for you guys there. But we love these kind of conversations. It's funny how much you can actually get into them. So if you have any comments about, mint choc chip ice cream being the best, better than Safala Gold, then please keep them coming. But we're going to get into the rest of the night now. As we said, it's pretty full-on talk tonight. It's pretty hard-hitting. So stick with us. Try and not get too discouraged that you want to leave. But definitely keep on thinking about some of the questions and the challenges that actually come out to it. So we're going to move on to Jess now, who's going to be reading the Bible from us. Now, it's a big Bible verse tonight. We are reading 4 verses from chapter 4. So, Jess, take it away for us.
Hey everyone, so as Caitlin said, I'm Jess. I'm in my first year studying criminal justice at Bathurst, and we're going to be reading Ecclesiastes 4, 1-3 tonight. So I'll give you a moment to get it open. As Caitlin said, it's pretty short. So Ecclesiastes 4, 1-3. Again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun.
Well, wow, that is just about the most bleak assessment of the world I've ever heard. The dead are happier than the living, and better than both is the one who's never been born. Tonight we've come to yet another test of life under the sun, the justice test. And to begin with, I want to draw your attention to a sentence that was part of chapter 3 that we skipped over last week. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 16. It says, I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. When you look at this world, at life under the sun, you see injustice. Now, human beings are finely tuned to justice. One of the early phrases we learn after mine and no is, it's not fair. We hate to see things being unfair, especially when it's unfair for me. When you're a kid, it's mostly nothings. He got more ice cream than me. She got more time on the TV or the iPad. Why can't I go? All my friends are going. The injustices are small and narrow. Not much is really lost except perhaps a bit of ice cream, which is not trivial when you're 8, but not world-ending, I guess, except unless it's a Golden Gate Thomas Fowler Gold. But when we grow up, we turn our justice meter out onto the world around us, and the readings are not good. The teacher doesn't say much about it here, just that one sentence in chapter 3 and then another at the start of chapter 4. He says, Again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. When you add this to his observation in chapter 3, what do we learn about injustice? I want to point out 4 things. Firstly, injustice is about corruption. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, corruption is undermining fairness. Corruption is deliberately not acting fairly. Showing favouritism to your friends or family or those who give you money. Treating your enemies or people you don't like badly, not because they deserve it, but because you can. Using authority you've been given to benefit yourself rather than for the purpose it's been given to you. Lying about other people, or using manipulation to get ahead instead of on your merits. I don't really need to say much more. We have an instinct, I think, for corruption, because we have an instinct for unfairness. We know it when we see it. And the horrible thing about corruption that we realise as we get older is that it is on every side. You can't get rid of injustice and corruption by voting for the other side, because the other side will end up just as corrupt if they aren't already. If you assume that there's a good side and a bad side, well, all you end up doing is wrecking everything, destroying your country, because you will assume that some people can't do wrong, and they really can. So think for a minute about one issue of fairness. Having enough to eat. I think we'd all agree that having enough to eat is basic to being human. And I think we would also all agree that us having more than enough to eat, so much that we throw away tons of food every day, when we know that there are so many people in the world who struggle just to have the bare minimum to eat each day, we would all agree that that is unfair, unjust. But what do we do about it? How do we solve this problem of injustice that we see in the world today? Well, the answer most people give is, we'll change the system. If we have a different system, then the injustice will be dealt with, it will disappear. But that doesn't happen. Not in the real world. Because in the real world, corruption is in every system. Because corruption is in all of us. It is part of the human condition. And that's the first problem. Injustice is about corruption. But there's more to say, because injustice is also about power. The reason that injustice is such a problem, and always will be a problem, is that injustice thrives where we have structures of power or authority. The teacher says it really clearly. Power is on the side of the oppressors. To be human is to live in relationships of authority, from our families to our workplaces to our governments at every level. Do you know there's a department in your local council that has the authority to tell you what you can build on any piece of land you own and refuse the permission to build if it doesn't want you to? There's another one that will tell you how much water you're allowed to use. Our state governments this year have produced law after law telling us who we can associate with, how many people we can see at any one time, and when and where. And we've followed their laws because we've felt that in balance, considering the times we're in, they are fair, just laws. And we could go on. In every circumstance of our lives, work, uni, government, there are relationships of power, of authority. And each of those structures have rules that they impose on us that we follow. And in every single one of those situations, there's a possibility of injustice, of corruption, because injustice is about the improper use of power. So lawmakers can make laws to benefit themselves or their friends. We've seen that happen. We've had cases in New South Wales of corruption that way. Or we can manipulate those in power to gain an advantage for ourselves. We can bribe or blackmail or use our connections to gain things for ourselves. And then injustice can just be an accident. Many places this year, when governments shut everything down to contain this virus, they allowed some businesses to stay open, what they called essential businesses. But whether your business was deemed essential became a bit arbitrary and therefore open to injustice. So if you were a small business, often a corner store, you were forced closed. But if you were a big chain store, you were allowed to stay open because you were deemed essential. And so without ever intending to, the law created unfairness and implicit injustice, because this is part of the human condition too. Sometimes we just create injustice without ever intending it, just by accident. So injustice is about corruption or unfairness, and injustice is about power. The third observation is that everyone has it in their power to do wrong, to be unjust. Injustice thrives in power structures, but we're all part of power structures. And in the end, it's us that makes them bad. Almost any structure can be good if the people in the structure are good. The problem is that none of us are totally good. We all have the potential for corruption because that's the way we roll as human beings. Big corruption, we often think in terms of big corruption. It almost never begins big. It almost always starts with little corruption. You know, work can spare that stationery, so I'll take a bit home with me. Movie companies and game companies, they're huge, so it doesn't matter if I pirate their content. And we just tend to move on from there. And you can bet that if the system is full of all those little bits of corruption from ordinary people like us, that those people who have a lot more power have the potential for a lot more corruption. Lord Acton is famous for saying over 100 years ago, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. All great men are bad men. Harsh, but true. And we see the truth of it in our own experience. We shouldn't be surprised by corruption because we can see the tendency in ourselves. Injustice is a condition of the human heart. This is why the best systems aren't perfect systems, but they know it and they set up checks and balances. The best system will know we have a tendency to use power to benefit ourselves and will help us by doing stuff to prevent us from perpetrating injustice, because injustice is everywhere. And that brings me to my final observation, that injustice is incredibly disheartening. When you wake up to injustice, when you actually see how universal it is, how deeply rooted in every system of government and law, how impossible to fix in any real way, well, it's just depressing and meaningless and futile. Some of the worst people never face justice for what they've done. Perhaps most of them. Hitler took his own life rather than face justice. Stalin and Mao, they killed tens of millions of their own people, and they died quietly in bed after long lives. And they're just some of the worst examples. How many others who have been profoundly corrupt and unjust have never seen the inside of a jail cell, never faced a court, never had to face up to the people that they've hurt? It's enough to drive you to despair for this world under the sun. It's no wonder you hear people say, I don't want to bring a child into the world like this. That's exactly the point the teacher makes. You know, when he says, I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who's never been born, who's not seen the evil that is done under the sun. That is a bleak perspective. But you can understand it. We even say stuff like that ourselves, you know, I'm glad Grandpa's gone so he doesn't have to see this happen. That's a horrible kind of consolation in your grief, but we understand it, don't we? This, for me, has been the worst of our observations of life under the sun so far. All of them have been difficult, but this one has been the absolute worst. Why? Because it's about what's inside me. It's not about time or the empty pleasures of life or the nature of work. It's about me. About the bent towards corruption and injustice that's inside of me. and you and all of us. And it drives home the sense of futility here. How can we possibly have any hope of fixing this when it's inside of us? And if the answer can't be in us, if it can't be under the sun, then where is it? And this terrible truth just rings down the centuries, down the millennia to us today. If there is no answer under the sun, can there be an answer? If there's there only despair and making the best of it? Well, obviously you know, if you've been watching Tuesday Night Live, that we want to promote an answer. An answer to injustice beyond the sun that can transform life under the sun. Because at the heart of the Christian faith is a recognition, a confession of our injustice and corruption, of our guilt, and owning up to it. But also the recognition of a lawgiver, someone who is completely just, beyond the sun. For Christians, God stands beyond the sun and he guarantees justice. God guarantees that the corrupt, the lawless, those who've used power to harm will not get away with it. They will face justice at the end because they will face God. And for all of us who share in the unfairness of this world under the sun, God provides mercy, not by ignoring our injustice, but by paying the cost of it himself. This is the glory of the Christian message of the cross of Jesus. In Jesus, God himself is both holding us accountable for our injustice and showing us mercy at the same time. Jesus takes our justice so that we can receive mercy and forgiveness. People often poke fun at Christians from the outside, and in particular the silly idea that God would come into our world to die. Witness The Life of Brian if you haven't seen that movie yet. But for us, this is the most incredible, beautiful part of our faith because it does two things. It doesn't pretend we're something we're not. It doesn't pretend we're all good and innocent and deserving when we know we're not. At the cross, in the death of Jesus, God takes our injustice seriously. And at the same time, though, it provides us with a solution, a way out, mercy. I want to commend the Christian faith to you because I think this 3,000-year-old book of Ecclesiastes rings as true for us today as it did for the teacher back then. And I think you see that as clearly as I do. And again, I ask you, if you don't like my answer, what is yours? What will be your answer to this problem of life under the sun?
Hey friends, my name's Ellie and we're going to pray now. So feel free to close your eyes or cross your arms or do whatever you need to concentrate, and we're going to talk to God. Father, as we are sitting in comfort here tonight, we know that there are many people in this world who are suffering. We pray for those in Bathurst who are homeless and poor, that you will be with them and bring them comfort and love. We thank you for the work that the Uniting Church is doing here with the homeless. We pray that through the love that they are shown, they will see the love of the Father and come to know you. We know that this is not only an issue in Bathurst, and we pray for those in the rest of the world who are also suffering. Thank you for those who help them and show them your love. We know that there may not be much hope for them in this life where we are living in a broken world, but we thank you for the hope that there is in a new life with you. Thank you for this new life with you in a new creation where there will be no more suffering or oppression. Please help us to have compassion for these people and share the blessing that we have been given with those who are less fortunate. Help us to follow the example of Christ, who also showed love and compassion to those who needed it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, thank you so much for leading us in prayer, Jess, and a very fitting prayer for the talk that we actually just listened to. And you're definitely right, Sanu. This, I think, was a really hard talk. It was very confronting. I don't know how you guys felt at home, but one of the things that you kind of pointed out is the fact that corruption is inside us.
Yeah.
And that thing of thinking that big corruption, which so often, me personally, it's so easy to look at that big corruption and just think, oh wow, people are so corrupt and they have so much power, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But actually realising that little corruption leads to that big corruption.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big mistakes we make. We look at people who are horribly corrupt and we go, they're not like me. I'm different to them.
Yeah.
But wisdom actually says, no, they are me, just with more opportunity to do more bad.
Yeah, and it really poses that question, I think, to me personally, that perhaps conversations that I can have with some of my friends who do cry out a lot in terms of the injustice that they see, and actually say, well, what would they do?
Yeah.
Because I think that reveals a lot. Yeah, so it's kind of helpful to have that realisation and that wisdom pointed out that, yeah, we're actually no different, and we do really struggle with corruption.
It's a difficult thing to face, though. I find it most difficult to face myself. Let's just go back and talk about the nature of time and things like that. That's easy.
Yeah. But no, and the impact that it had in terms of, you know, that hard line about it's better for someone to not be born and see this at all, which is just, very hard line. Crazy how much you can get out of, 3 verses.
Well, I once again, we say this every week, but how much do his words echo down the years? Because we use very similar kind of phrases even today. Yeah. You know, even that kind of, this week, I don't know how many times I've heard the phrase, so-and-so will be turning over in their grave, which is exactly this idea. Yeah. You know, better that they're dead than to see the things that you're doing now.
Yeah, very much.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with such a big talk, we have plenty of questions to deal with, which is always awesome. We'll go for about 10 minutes, and we'll just see how much we can get through. So we're going to start with Lockie's. A lot of the questions have to do with the talk itself, which is really great. So Lockie's first question, how do you define an improper use of power?
I feel like it's one of those things where you know it when you see it. But when you look at power, so the Bible, for instance, has a very particular view of power and authority. And the Bible would say that power and authority is given to people to be used for the good of others. So you're given power, because power is about power over other people. Okay, so authority and power are always about your relationships with other people. It doesn't exist as this kind of thing on its own. I'm powerful in the sense that I have authority over lots of people, which is why they often call the US president the most powerful person on the planet, because their authority extends not just in the US, but US has a worldwide influence. And so that's what power is about. Power is about your influence over other people. And so an improper use of power is about using that power to serve yourself rather than to serve others. Okay. So in the, this is the interesting thing. So we've actually gained a lot of our titles of our office holders in Australia from the Bible. And so we call the most senior politician in our country, the most powerful politician in our country, what do we call them? The Prime Minister, the first servant.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And so our government is seen as service to the people. And that's a classic Christian conception that comes actually from the Middle Ages and the Reformation period. A classic conception of what it means to actually be in power. The one in power was meant to use their power to humbly serve others. So an improper use of power is actually exactly that. It's actually...
There's a self-centeredness.
It's a perversion. It's not serving the needs of the people. It's actually serving your own needs. And which is why we see this around the world today, you know, politicians who fill their own pockets, that they use their position to fill their own pockets and the pockets of their family. So they talk about Vladimir Putin, for instance, is one of the richest people on the planet because he's basically just used his time in government to enrich himself. And that level of corruption is just kind of astonishing when you see it. But that's what we need.
And I think it leads into Michael's question quite good. Because if power corrupts people, why does God ordain certain roles and offices within his church that we have power, responsibility? And so that idea about service is very different.
Well, that's right, because there is an ideal to this. That's like, why does God allow for marriage when people are awful and marriages are terrible? Because these things have a structure, and the way we live in them, particularly as Christian people, can actually show something of what they were meant to be. Which is why Christians had such a profound influence on the way the structure of our whole society is made up, on our constitution, on the way we define our office bearers and things like that we don't really recognise anymore, but is actually much more profound than simply saying prayers in Parliament or things like that. So yes, I think that's why, and it's because those relationships of authority are part of being human. From the very beginning with the institution of the family. Relationships have inherent they're inherently set up so that there are people that you submit to at different times. Sometimes that's just situational.
Yeah.
Sometimes
there are authority figures.
But there are authority
like
figures
parents,
in your life.
Yeah.
Parents of governments, kings, those sort of things, and it's right and appropriate to submit to them. Matter of fact, the Bible actually calls you to submit to your rulers even when they're corrupt, even when they're
true,
evil.
And we might actually get to that.
We're going to do some more talking about politics. There's going to be more politics going on.
But it does raise a big question about like power itself, because power itself is not bad, because God himself is powerful. But it's about the corruption that comes from that.
Well, humanity are called to exercise power. Think about in a Christian conception anyway. We see ourselves as stewards of creation, stewards of the world, people who are meant to rule it and care for it. And our rule is meant to be for the good or benefit of creation. Now, we don't do that terribly well, but that's a Christian conception. But I think even non-Christian people have a similar conception of the world. You know, the environmental movement is predicated on the idea that we have a responsibility for the planet and the way we treat it. No other animal considers the way they treat the planet. They just live and do what they do, whereas human beings, we sit back and we consider how are we living and what are we responsible for. So power is part of who we are.
Really interesting. But it's the corruption, it's the sinfulness
Yeah.
that makes the power bad. Yeah, really interesting. So I hope that helps you, Lockie and Michael out, and anyone else wondering those sort of questions. We got a question from Jess. How would you describe the sinful nature of humanity? Kind of what we've been talking about and what you talked about in our own sinful corruption. To a non-Christian friend, someone who doesn't believe. How do you help them understand how much they need God in a loving way?
This is a really good question, and I won't do it justice now. I'll say a couple of things, but I imagine if we thought about it, we could probably think of quite a few things to say. One of the things I try and talk to people about is standards they set for themselves. Because I think quite often we don't even meet the standards we set for ourselves. And so I often say to people, have you ever been ashamed of something you've said or done or thought? And people go, yes. And I go, well, there we have it. We struggle to live up to the standards we set for ourselves. And what we tend to do is justify our behaviour. We draw the line of unacceptable behaviour just beyond the way we behave.
We point to someone who's worse than us.
There's always someone. So we're great on comparisons. There's always someone worse than me. Those sorts of things. And so those sort of questions are good to ask. And I think as well, what's the idealised picture your friend has of the world? And so just explore with your friend, what do they actually think about the world? How do they think the world should be? Because one thing is about themselves and how they are. The other thing is about humanity and the way humanity is. And often we struggle with this question. So I reckon if you asked your friend, are people basically good or basically bad? Your friend would say people are basically good. But when you start to ask questions about the world and the way people act and the way they act, all of a sudden they actually start to reconsider. And so my option is always to just ask questions and explore the way people think and work out what that means. How do they think of other people and how they should act? What do they do about those things? How would they change the world? Does the world need to be changed? Because if people are basically good, surely the world is in a good place. The world's all fine and hunky-dory. So why is it that we act the way we do and do the things we do? Why is it that I can't seem to act the way I would even idealise the way I should act?
And that's the thing, you brought it out lots in your talk, like how many examples did you actually show about the corruptness in our world? And, you know, that's only a very few, and even the passage says, like, you look around and you see you see it, you see the corrupt nature, you see the fallenness, and it kind of isn't that hard to kind of say, but what about this thing that's recently just happened, or...
It's so funny, because I think a lot of Christians say, let's use the Ten Commandments, and let's see if you've broken the Ten Commandments, but often, I reckon, honestly, you could say to people, well, let's write the You Commandments. What do you reckon would define the good life? What would, for you, would be the good life, like life lived right and well? And then just ask the question, so do you live up to that? Because this is the thing, I don't think we even live up to our own standards. So we can talk about God's standard. I think the great thing about God's standard is it's not arbitrary and subjective. It's actually objective. It's from somewhere else. But even our own subjective standards, we fail at, don't we?
Yeah,
I do.
all the time. I've read so many things this week on actually like how bad we are at reaching our own standards. And,
I mean, this is the basis for all those self-help industries, isn't it? Because we basically suck. And so I think it's actually, funnily enough, I've spent lots of fruitless hours trying to convince my friends they're terrible, sinful people. But I tend now just to explore their worldview and the way they think, because I think it's pretty easy for them to see the point that we're trying to make.
Yeah, and I think just as well, like what we're doing right here on Tuesday Night Lives is a great way to actually perhaps bring them along. You don't have to necessarily do all the work.
Yep.
What you could do is invite them to come and watch
us bumble around.
Yeah,
and
listen to Seno and how he talks about Ecclesiastes, because I think that's the great thing about what you keep on bringing up about Ecclesiastes is it's so real to today's time.
Yeah.
And there is a reality that actually brings up the questions that you might want to ask about, well, what do you actually think about this life here and now? And so it's a great way to actually kind of take the burden off yourself, perhaps, and just kind of say, oh, let's have a discussion from the talk that happens tonight, which is sometimes really easy, sometimes even harder, but yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to a question from Lockie, which is what happened to Job unjust? So for those who have never read the story of Job, Job is a man. It's a book in the Bible where, how do you describe him? So he's made known as a blameless and upright man, and yet Satan, there's this kind of scene between Satan and God where Satan kind of convinces God, is that the right term, to harm Job, to, in a sense, wreck his life, literally wreck his life, so that perhaps they might test his faith.
Yeah.
See whether or not he will still praise God at the end of the day. That's kind of the situation. Real bad sum up. Definitely worth a read.
Job is a story that's really well worth reading, and with a bunch of friends, you want to read it out loud because it is scathing. Some of the stuff they say to each other is hilarious and funny, really funny, but also brutal. Is what happened to Job unjust? I'm going to give a classic Seno answer and say yes and no. Unjust things happen to Job. Okay, so people act unjustly, and so his family are killed his children are killed by robbers, those sort of things. Those things are unjust. The diseases that happen they're just the stuff of life. They're not unjust in any way. One of the big points of the book of Job is what happens to you is not necessarily what you deserve. And so Job is portrayed as this blameless and upright person. And he's a pretty good person. He's not perfect, but he's a pretty good person. But you don't get what you have just because you're a good person. Yeah. That's one of the things we've been looking at in Ecclesiastes, and that the book of Job points out very clearly. And so Job's blessing at the start, the status of his life, all the things that he had, they're not just either. That's not justice either. That's also grace. God, he has the assets he has the family, he has all the wealth and all the possessions and the property he has, not because he deserves it any more than anybody else in the world. He doesn't. We don't deserve it, do we? We're all the same. He has it out of God's kindness. And so when it's taken away, that is not unjust. And so what happens to him is not unjust in that sense. It's unjust things happen. People do injustices to him. But to not have those things is not unjust. He's slightly worse off than most people in the world, but he's definitely in the bottom 10%. But there are a lot of people who suffer in their life. A lot of people who go through awful things, and they are no different to Job. Which is why Job, by the way, says, "The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." He doesn't curse God, because what he recognises what happened to him is not unjust, and so he still worships God. And this is the thing, we often turn our eyes to the heavens, don't we, and say, this is not fair. Why are you doing this to me, God? We often do that when things are not going well. When things are going well, we go, oh, I'm awesome. I'm awesome. But when things are going badly, why? Come on! Because that's what we're like. It's how we roll. But there is no sense of absolute injustice from God's perspective there, no, for Job. Sorry, long answer, short question.
No, helpful. It's a good question. And there are plenty more questions that we're not going to get to tonight, just because of time, and we don't want question time to go longer than the talk. But
quite frequently does.
But we're going to have a bit of an early mark tonight. But just a reminder, usually we have a question time on Thursday,
yes.
But this week it won't be happening, but that doesn't mean we won't get to your questions. We will get to questions further down the track next week. It's just that this week, Thursday, question time will not be on. So don't stress out when we don't pop up on Thursday. We will be back next week.
Yeah. And I should say as well, keep posting your questions. So if you don't get to put it on here, keep putting it on the comments when this is saved as an item in the group, or post your own question or personal message your question through either way. Any way you can find to get it here. If you want to be a bit more anonymous, maybe you can send your question to your mate who can send it in for you, that sort of thing. All that sort of stuff, but bring the questions in. We're more than happy for the questions to go along with the talk, schmalk, whatever. But we are very interested in hearing what you're thinking about and what questions you have, and more than happy to talk about those things, however imperfectly we do it.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about raising the conversation and just having it and dealing with these really hard things that we struggle with.
Yep, that's the whole point.
Yeah. So obviously tonight a big question has been raised about the injustice that we see in the world, and that it is disheartening. We see just how futile and meaningless this life is when we look under the sun. And so we were pointed to the fact that while we can't fix this ourselves, because it's inside of us, there is a solution outside. That Jesus is the one who takes away, that he deals with the judgment, he deals with the justice that we should receive, and instead we receive mercy. And so if you've been kind of struck by some of that tonight, keep on thinking about it, keep on dwelling on it, perhaps chat to your friends, have a little chat after this tonight, but keep on thinking more about what is beyond the sun. But thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you next week.
See you then.